Hey there YouTube, I'm Forrest, Latter-day Skeptic. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a book called The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. It's a fantastic book written by an amazing author, and I encourage everyone to read it. But I want to talk specifically about Dr. Haidt's analogy of the elephant and the rider. It's one of the main takeaways of the book, and I think it gets our understanding of emotions, intuitions, and reason very wrong. But hang around until the end to hear an analogy that I think better captures the data presented in this book. Dr. Haidt's analogy of the elephant and the rider is one of his most famous contributions to the field of social psychology. The analogy is a rider on an elephant, where the rider is our ability to reason, and the elephant are our emotions or intuitions. Here's Dr. Haidt on a podcast explaining his analogy.
When I die and I think about what I've left behind, eventually it'll probably just be one metaphor. And that metaphor is that the mind is divided like a rider on an elephant. And the rider represents your conscious verbal reasoning, the stuff you're aware of, the stuff that uses logic. And everything else is the elephant. It's the automatic processes. It's the 99% of what's going on in your mind that you're not aware of. And what the advice boils down to is most of us spend a lot of our time trying to persuade other people's riders. We give them all these reasons. Here are the 7 reasons why you're wrong or why you should see it my way. When in fact, the way to persuade people is to speak to the elephant first. The elephant is a lot stronger than the rider. If you get somebody feeling the truth of what you're saying or feeling that they like you or like what you're saying, and the elephant kind of wants to go in your direction, then it's effortless to persuade the rider to go along. But if the elephant is digging in its heels, the elephant doesn't want to go, doesn't want to be dragged along by you to the conclusion that you're trying to get him to, then there's really nothing you can say that will persuade the rider.
In his book, he cites studies that describe how our intuitions respond rapidly to situations, well before our rational minds can even consider the problem. He says that this perfectly fits the social intuitionist model, which states that intuitions come first and strategic reasoning comes second. He uses these studies to describe how the elephant and the rider relate to each other. I've thought a lot about this analogy and I can't seem to make sense of it. How does it work exactly? I understand that this elephant is a large and powerful force that's hard to overcome. But can it be overcome? Jonathan actually says that it can. It is possible for people to simply reason their way to a moral conclusion that contradicts their initial intuitive judgment, although I believe this process is rare. So the rider actually can overcome the elephant? This seems to paint a contradictory picture for this analogy.
But if the elephant is digging in its heels, the elephant doesn't want to go, doesn't want to be dragged along by you to the conclusion that you're trying to get him to, then there's really nothing you can say that will persuade the rider.
Then later, towards the end of the chapter, he describes a study that shows a temporary nature to this elephant. He says that given time between stimuli and decision, people tend to be much more rational. How does this principle translate to the analogy? How does the rider wait to make a decision when he's already on top of a moving elephant? Another study showed how quick our intuitive and emotional responses are. They're rapid, but they're fleeting. Does this sound like a big, burly elephant to you? A good analogy should require little explanation and be understood intuitively. The analogy of the elephant and the rider doesn't seem to make much sense and provides very little insight when you start to ask questions like, what's the point of the rider in the first place? What value does the rider provide? And when wanting to go in different directions, who should we listen to, the rider or the elephant? And what does it mean when Dr. Haidt says that the rider usually just justifies the direction of the elephant anyways? What's the point of the rider at all? The rider just seems to be a useless passenger on this big elephant. I think the main point behind Dr. Haidt's analogy is to show that people often follow their instinct and then justify it after the fact. And I completely agree with this point. But the elephant analogy traps us into thinking that the rider is powerless over this large animal. If we're not able to act on our reason, then the whole idea of personal responsibility and the enlightenment value of reason is all an illusion. This makes us all just victims to our emotions and not responsible for our actions. If we can't reason ourselves to do otherwise, then we're just passengers on the back of this elephant going wherever the elephant wants to go. But why am I making this video? I'm making it because I've seen this analogy used to justify irrational behavior, usually in the form of, well, whatever, we're all just following our emotional elephants anyways. I've even seen it used to discredit rational arguments, usually something like, Forrest, haven't you read Jonathan Haidt's book? No matter how rational you think you are, we're all just riders justifying the direction that our elephants want to go. If you've ever heard these kind of justifications, I'd love to hear about it in the comment section below. In Dr. Haidt's defense, he doesn't always say that the elephant can't be overpowered. He seems to contradict himself and says that sometimes, rarely, rationality can win out. Now, I'm not pretending that I've studied this my whole career like Jonathan Haidt has, so I'm not going to argue with the data presented in the book. Now, I am arguing about the conclusions that he draws from this data and how he builds the analogy of the elephant and the rider. Looking at the studies presented in the book, there's a few qualities that Jonathan Haidt's elephant must have. Elephants are constantly and quickly being pulled towards stimuli. Elephants' movements are usually small and hard to notice. Elephants are only temporarily interested in most stimuli. Elephants have some useful understanding of reality, but it has its limits. The elephant needs a rider, or else the elephant will cause problems. What animal tends to be highly reactive to stimuli, squirrel, has a short-term memory, usually is small enough where their pull only causes us to lean a little bit? They have some useful understanding of reality, loves to pull us in certain directions, but yet needs guidance to walk from point A to point B. Does this animal sound like a massive elephant to you? Now I want to give you my own analogy related to reason and emotion. I call it the dog walker model. Now imagine a dog walker walking to the park with a pack of dogs, all of varying sizes and demeanors. Some bark at every squirrel that goes by, and some don't bark at anything. And we walk these dogs in various settings, sometimes at night down the street in a scary alley, and sometimes we walk them in an open field. The walker is our ability to reason, and the dogs represent our intuitions and our emotions.
I wouldn't even say that I love dogs. I would say that I refuse to have a life that does not have dogs in it. Who I am is someone who wants dogs around. I don't even think of myself as loving dogs. It's just they're almost like an extension. Like I don't love my right hand, you know? It's just there.
So what insights can we pull from this analogy? What does it mean to have a well-trained dog? And what does it mean to have the dog walker being pulled around by this pack of dogs? What does it mean when they're walking at night and the dogs start barking in a bush? What does it mean when the dog walker lets go of the dogs and lets them attack a threat? And who is always responsible for getting the dogs from point A to point B? If you think about the dog walker as our rational mind and the dogs as our emotions, you can probably figure out what most of these situations represent. Think about what other kind of situations you can come up with. I think that this analogy works well for many reasons. First, the dog walker should always use their best judgment to their dog's reactions. The dog walker is always responsible for the dogs. Second, some dogs are well trained and some aren't. Some dog walkers are pros and can take a pack of Belgian Malinois out in public.
Are you guys seeing this? Oh, it's just like a perfect day. Look at just perfect little angels. Oh my God, I love these guys. You're so good. You are so good, puppies. You're so good, puppies. I love you.
Third, dogs make quick, temporary reactions to stimuli.
For you, and I want you to fly here now and squirrel!
Fourth, dogs tend to pull in all sorts of different directions, but sometimes they all pull in one direction, and that's the pull that's the hardest to resist. Fifth, the dog's reactions can be extremely useful and gives the dog walker extra information to make a decision. Dogs are in no way useless.
Good.
Sixth, dogs can be trained. You can work on making your dog less responsive to stimuli. You can also work on making them more responsive to stimuli. And seventh, sometimes you have to release the dogs. I believe this analogy better fits the data. It grants the critical points to Dr. Haidt's research while still providing a clear and relatable picture of how emotions and reason interact. No one is saying that the dogs aren't of use to the dog walker, but at the end of the day, the dog walker is always responsible for the dogs. The better the dog walker knows their dogs, the more they'll be able to utilize them correctly. They need to know when the dogs need more training, and they need to know when they can release the dogs. I think this analogy holds up really well in real life. Next time you're in the car and somebody cuts you off, and at that exact same moment, you hear a politician say something stupid on the radio, and you're panicked because you forgot to subscribe to the Latter-day Skeptic YouTube channel, think about all the stimuli your dogs are barking at and how the dog walker should respond. Lastly, it's important to remember that I love my dogs. They're one of the greatest parts of my life. Emotions make life worth living, but don't ever let your emotions be an excuse for your actions. Like any good dog walker, your rational mind should always be in control of your pack of dogs. I'd like to leave you with some wise words from one of the brightest men I know, Jonathan Haidt.
The next untruth is always trust your feelings. It may sound wise, it may sound romantic, but wise people around the world have noticed that we don't react to the world as it actually is. We react to the constructions, the perceptions. Epictetus said, it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our interpretations of things. What we what we've begun seeing on campus is that students are encouraged to follow their feelings. If they feel offended by something, then they have been attacked. They're supposed to not question those feelings. But part of wisdom is the ability to say, now wait a second, are there other ways to look at this? These are crucial skills for critical thinking. These are crucial skills for mental health. And we need to be teaching young people at all stages to question their first interpretations, look for evidence, and improve the way they interpret the world.
That's all I've got. I'm Forrest, the Latter-day Skeptic. Please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.